characteristic of a particular social group or organization. It is a set of learned beliefs, values, behaviors, the way of life shared by members of society. So what ideas then affect government and therefore culture. When we take a look at the United States, it was founded as a nation based on the Bible and biblical values. The Constitution outlines our freedoms and rights, and we have personal property rights. Our forefathers came to us. They fled the colonies for religious freedom so that they could study and believe in the Bible and Jesus Christ. And they also wanted to get away from feudalism. And feudalism is nothing but communism. It's control, total control. They wanted to own property, and they wanted to put off tyranny. The values in the Word of God say, so God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. That is up until Agenda 21 in 1992. Where was the world before Agenda 21? The world before Agenda 21, from the beginning of history, time, from the birth of Christ, had a Christian worldview, according to Genesis, that said man had dominance over the earth. However, with Agenda 21 came a pagan worldview that the earth has dominance over man. So, what does this lead to? Well, paganism never leads to anything positive. But the values of America are in the process of being radically changed. The UN has succeeded in altering and changing God's Word. They are imposing a pagan philosophy that will change culture, values, and the rights of man. Until 1992, the Bible, or the biblical worldview that man was at the center of the universe, was unquestioned. So, what occurred in 1992? 179 governments, there are 191 governments in the world, 179 governments went to Rio de Janeiro, comprised of world leaders, business leaders, scientists, and environmental, population reduction, and social planning non-governmental organizations. And what did they do? They agreed to, through a consensus process, to sustainable development, the Biological Diversity Treaty, which we know today as smart growth, and a statement on forest principles and the framework on the Convention on Climate Change. The ones in the white, the last two, we will not be addressing. We don't have time. In other words, 25,000 well-placed leaders and NGOs are completely reordering the world. The world has not been reordered like this until and since Eve ate the fruit. We have 1,300 pages of taxes and rules to control every aspect of life on Earth. And so what are they saying? First of all, they're saying the world can't feed and sustain 8.5 billion people. I have been in meetings where I have heard people say, like Jacques Cousteau, that it is really a shame, but we'd have to kill at least, I think it was 100,000 people a day in order to get the world into the carrying capacity that the United Nations has said it needs to have. People are destroying the earth. They need to be contained. Animals have more value than man, and they should be able to roam freely. Built within the 13 pages of the Biological Diversity Treaty and Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development is a transfer of wealth from the haves to the have-nots. They are reordering property rights and individual rights. It is the elimination of representative government. So what does this really do? Well, this is what we're going to be seeing and discussing this evening. Sustainable development, biological diversity, smart growth, sustainable development again, and biological diversity. For transfer of wealth, that's nothing but socialism, the destruction of the standard of living that we enjoy, the reordering of property rights, that's smart growth again, and the elimination of representative government through public-private partnership and regional government. And your state, like my state, is facing these things. So which of these are in the Constitution? And pray tell, if a Democratic administration, the Clinton administration, adopted Agenda 21 in 1992, why are the Republicans continuing to implement it? Please answer that question. In the documents for Agenda 21, they say, we need a new collaborative decision process that leads to better decisions, more rapid change, and more sensible use of human, natural, and financial resources in achieving our goals. This will be done without accountability to any government or any individual. Government today, as we know it, will be stripped of their power. The barriers between the nation states are gone. The loss of value of life through sustainable development and eminent domain. Public-private partnerships, which is the transfer of power to corporations and the loss of representative government for every public-private partnership that gets set up. Smart growth, the demise of the farmer and eminent domain, and regional government, the U.S. to be put in an EU type of trade zone. So let's take a look at these. The barriers between the nation states are gone. How did they fall? In 1944, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were established. Subsequently, the economic barriers between the nation states fell. That was augmented by a law in 1980 that has helped to integrate the monies of the world so that there's money coming into the U.S. and money invested in other countries. In 1945, the political barriers fell with the establishment of the United Nations. In 1963, 1972, and 1992, the environmental barriers between the nation states fell. In 1994, with the establishment of World Trade Organization, the trade barriers fell. In 1992, as a result of Y2K, the electronic barriers between the nation states fell. We are all interconnected. And in 1998, the International Criminal Court was established. The legal and judicial barriers between the nation states fell at that time. Let me just make a couple comments here. I was at the birthing of the International Criminal Court in Rome. It was, in my opinion, pretty chilling, pretty scary. The fact that it was held in Rome I thought was very interesting because not since the Holy Roman Empire has an international entity been allowed to transcend sovereign countries to arrest an alleged international criminal. As a result of September 11th, I did a fair amount of research, and I was shocked to understand, as I did my research, that since all the other barriers had fallen, if we were going to have a world that is interconnected, then you must tear down the military and the intelligence barriers. And that is what happened as a result of 9/11. So we went from a world with barriers to a world without barriers, integrated, interdependent. These are words that are used constantly and continuously at all of the meetings that I attend. We are one world. So what does this really mean? Another set of laws now prevail. What are they? They're international law. You see, when you set in place an international structure, you have to have a new set of law. And international law dictates the behavior between countries. With that, let's take a look at the United Nations only for a moment. The United Nations has a head of state, Secretary General. It has a governing body, the General Assembly. It has a currency, its own currency called the Special Drawing Right. It has a treasury and its own financial system called the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. It has its own military and police force. And in the last couple of years, they have been given the right to have their own military and police force. This is not something that they've always had. And within the last 6 months, they have started to raise monies through global taxation. At one of the meetings that I was at, the G8 meeting in last year in Scotland, where Jacques Chirac announced, as he had done 6 months previous that the world needed a global tax or a tax for the poor, I asked Mr. Chirac, because they were talking about a tax on airline tickets, if that went well, did they see other international taxes? And he said to me, we have many more planned. When we take a look at the United Nations, there is a meeting every 5 years of the heads of state. That is called a summit. When the heads of state aren't meeting yearly, the General Assembly is meeting through ambassadors that are appointed government. I want you to see something else, and it took a while for me to piece this together because this was also foreign to me as I was studying the international level and as I was learning and as I was researching. The World Trade Organization, when they meet, all the trade representatives from all the countries of the world are meeting. It is a parliament of trade representatives. When the IMF World Bank meets, all the treasury secretaries from around the world are meeting. It is a parliament of treasury secretaries. Each of these meetings has their own document, their own plan of action, their own rules that these secretary treasuries and trade representatives ad nauseum take back to their own countries and implement. When we talk about food, all the secretaries of agriculture are meeting. International labor, the Secretary of Labor. The Security Council only has 5 members, 5 permanent members, but the secretaries of state meet there. Again, these are parliaments. And Habitat, that means where you live. The Secretary of Health and Human Services. You can go on to education and some of the other areas, transportation, you get the idea. And what do you have here? When you look at this, all of this corresponds to the cabinet that we have here in the United States. When we take a look at the United Nations, let's take a look at what the United States Constitution gives. Our rights come from God. They are inalienable. They cannot be taken away for what you say or your behavior. We have, supposedly and hopefully, a Republican form of government, property rights, individual liberty, and, if you believe it today, limited government. The United Nations Charter, the rights come not from God but government. They are limited in number. They can be taken away for what you say or what you do. They have a charter form, a feudalistic form for the greater good and common rights, or common good. Now, if you're not familiar with this, the UN Charter is based on the Russian Constitution. Now, which one will you be supporting when you vote in your legislature? When we take a look at the structure now that has been set in place, there is the global level, the federal level, and the state level. So let's take a closer look at what this means and how it's changing. You cannot go from the global to the state or the local. You cannot without the federal level giving their consent, which they have done. So let's take, oops, wrong button. When we take a look at Agenda 21, we now see that the federal level is saying to the state level, yes to smart growth, yes to sustainable development, yes to eminent domain, yes to privatization, and yes to public-private partnerships. These are the things that your state legislators will be dealing with. Now let's take a look at what is beneath the state, the city, the county, and the township. And what you're seeing through regional government is that it's multi-jurisdictional rule. The state, the county, the city, the township is starting to merge. And you see that there. So what happens? Eventually there's only 2 levels, the global and the federal, with the regional government. What is this really? It's a devolution of government. That's happening globally, by the way. I have people from around the world who contact me, whether they are in Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, England. It's happening all over. Really, the bottom line is no representative government. In France, they would call this tyranny. When did America adopt regional government, the devolution of government? Well, the New York Times in April of 1935 had an article, and they said that there was a plan that envisioned the merger of the states into 9 departments, transferring the taxing authority to federal agencies, the termination of states' rights, and the abolishing the Constitution. Local, state, and federal elected officials would be replaced by appointed professionals. Is that not what you're hearing? We need professionals to rule us? What are the steps to regionalism? In 1969, Nixon merged the 50 states into 10 federal regions through Executive Order 11647. That was followed up by Carter, who created Fema as the enforcement arm of the regional officials with Executive Order 12148. In 1998, Executive Order 13083, the federalism order came down, if you're familiar with that. It redefines, because this is right on with regional government, it redefines the word state so that it includes all levels. It delineates between the Constitution and federalism. It changes sovereign powers granted to states so federal agencies have control over states. It allows the president to declare national emergency, which gives FEMA power to the federal, state, and local levels of government with total control over communications, power, and food.
All right, for August 26, 2014, Homeland Security and FEMA, as I have been reporting on for the last number of weeks, they're back and they're in force, and they're going to be in metropolitan Detroit assessing the flood damage before the rains ever came, before the rains and the floods ever hit the Detroit area. FEMA was out in force. Homeland Security and the floods ever hit the Detroit area. Rains ever came, before the rains and the floods ever hit. Rains ever came, before the rains and the floods ever hit the Detroit area. FEMA was out in force, Homeland Security, with convoys of their vehicles. They were in my area. They were peering in the windows of vacant homes. Something is brewing. Now they're going to be in the Detroit area, knocking on your door. Don't answer. This is from Local 4 News today. Let me play this for you.
Hey everyone, it's Lauren Podell, and on Local 4 News today, we're talking flood damage. You turn down certain streets in certain cities, and you will still see that damage piled high. But today, FEMA will be making a tour throughout Metro Detroit, surveying that damage, assessing it. We'll tell you why you may get a knock on your front door and the money that could be rolling into our area to help clean this up. We'll talk about it throughout the morning on Local 4 News today.
You could get a knock on your front door. The floods were weeks ago. Everything has been pretty much dried up, and now FEMA is going to come and knock on your door, peer in your window. Something in Michigan, I don't know what, something is about to happen. FEMA, they have been all over the place. Before the rains came, before we had any flooding in Detroit, they have been everywhere. Something's not right. Subscribe to my channel.
M-A-A-D, MAD. You have M-I, this A-D, first of all, the A-D we know is abbreviation for advantage, advance, etc., okay? Now look, you have M-I-N-I-S-T. All you need is that E over here, and you have minister. Or rat. Now, I'm going to prove to you that everything is hidden in plain sight. Minister. Let's go up here and Google minister. Minister. A member of clergy, especially in the Protestant churches, clergyman, clergywoman, pastor, priest, parson, deacon, father. You get the point. Right here, in certain countries, a head of a government department Britain's defense minister. Synonyms: member of the government, cabinet minister, secretary of state, undersecretary, a government minister.
We've got Homeland Security here in St. Tammany Parish. Wonder what they're doing here. Federal Protective Service. Brand new car, U.S. government. And the storm's on its way. And believe you me, they're not here to protect you. They're here to make sure that their private security corporations do the killing and hit the targets. That's why they're here. And then, of course, they love giving money, because money has no backing. It's just absolutely worth nothing. It is digital. They just print it. And they give it, and the next thing you know, your city's in debt. You're in debt when you apply for FEMA. This is absolute corruption to the core. And the average person just remains, no matter how many times you tell them. And I don't even know why they even want to take out the targets, because no matter how many times you tell these people what's going on, these goats, I don't know what else to call them except goats. They're genetically modified demons. And you can tell them 1,000 times what's happening, and they don't believe us. They, for some reason, think that their government is there to protect them. They're under complete MK Ultra mind control. It is absolute insanity.
Maintain humanity under 500 million. So, how many people we gotta kill? Million. So, how many people we gotta kill? Opened, you know? Yeah. That's stupid. Yeah. All right, here we go. Maintain humanity under 500 million. So, how many people we gotta kill?
We gotta kill a lot of people.
Well, Monsanto's doing a good job. Maybe Monsanto, maybe they did this. That's a good possibility. Who knows? But they want to kill plenty of people. Reduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Okay. They want to kill plenty of people.
We just know that they're killing a lot of people.
Here we go. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Okay. Well, that's eugenics. So who's the head of eugenics right now, Scotty? Bill Gates? Seriously. Pretty much.
There's no eugenics anymore.
Well.
A year ago, I spoke in Alabama on regional government. It was very interesting. When you take a look at the Alabama Constitution of 1901, let's see what it said. We, the people of the state of Alabama, in order to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, invoking the favor and guidance of Almighty God, do ordain and establish the following constitution and form of government for the state of Alabama. Now let's see what they have under regional government. The Alabama Association of Regional Councils, ARC, is a public organization encompassing a multi-jurisdictional regional community. It's founded and sustained directly and tied to local governments. It is a non-profit organization. Do we call that government? The formation of the regional councils in Alabama has its basis in state law. Doesn't come from God like the earlier one. The earliest authorization for formation of a regional planning council was enacted by the Alabama State Legislature in 1935. This goes back to Roosevelt. So little by little, step by step, they have been building. So let's take a look at Agenda 21. What is it? As we look at the fact that it's a loss of the value of life, and that is tied to eminent domain. Sustainable development says there are too many people on the planet and we must reduce the population. The Earth's resources must be conserved and preserved. And lastly, the United Nations is the only global organization in a position to do this. So let's take a look at too many people. How are they going to reduce the people? Are any of you familiar with this? Absolutely. Dr. Jacqueline Kaysen from Humboldt University said in her fabulous book that if we were to put all the people of the world into the state of Texas, each one would have 1,200 square feet of living space. That's good math, in my opinion. So will you put into place laws that are based on a lie? So sustainable development was adopted by most countries worldwide, including the United States. It was supported by the Group of 8, the Group of 20, and other major political groups. It was supported by transnational corporations worldwide. It is an organizing principle for the United Nations. And what do they say? The soul has no value. That's the bottom line. The soul has no value.